All right, welcome back to the Karate Guys. Today we have a special guest, a very, very awesome person, a longtime friend, student, and fighter of Shidokan Atlanta. I'd like to introduce you all to Vinny Balsamello. And let me tell you a little bit about Vinny. As a fighter, he's the first of our students to go abroad, meaning to go outside the U.S. and have success in international competition. So without any further ado, let me introduce you to Vinny Balsamello.
Glad to be here, guys. Really appreciate you having me. It's a complete honor to actually sit here and to be a part of this.
So Vinny, before you got in karate, you were in bodybuilding. So how did you end up? Would you please tell everybody how you got into karate?
Sure. So back in 2009, I decided to compete in bodybuilding again. My wife and I worked together. We did just about everything together. Now I was training 4 or 5 hours a day. And she got fed up with being home, watching me meal prep, and watching me go to the gym and prepare for these shows. So Rhonda, as we all know, jumped in and started training at Shidokan Atlanta. And after the bodybuilding season was over that year, started pushing me to come into the gym to train with you guys. She absolutely loved the sport, had no background in athletics, definitely no background in martial arts, but just loved the family environment and the competition that was involved. She also liked punching and kicking people and getting punched and kicked. So the end of that year in December, I decided to give it a shot. I said, well, I'll come in, I'll do a couple of classes, and we'll see how this goes. And I was sold after the first class. I think I was in there the first day. We did some bare knuckle sparring and Shidokan Kyokushin styles. And I think I hit John that trained with us, Big John, yes, a little too hard. And then I think he hit me a little too hard. And it was 3 minutes of just going back and forth. Really learning and understanding what Kyokushin and knockdown karate was all about.
Very cool, very cool. And speaking of, Rhonda, your late wife, when she started training, like you said, she was a true warrior. I mean, she'd get out there. You could put Godzilla in front of her, and she would give him some rounds. Very few people will just get out there. She'll try anything. She's done. She got out there. She did some Thai boxing. She got out there. She grappled. She got out there. She did bare knuckle karate. I mean, she get out there and do it all. And I think she actually gave a lot of the guys encouragement. She motivated them or inspired them to get out there to compete.
Absolutely. And what many people didn't know at the time, you didn't know at the time either, because Rhonda kept it a secret. She would go and join grappling tournaments. She did Naga. I think she did Copa back then without telling the gym.
She would just get out there and just do it.
Literally, we'd show up in a karate gi with her yellow belt, which obviously doesn't exist in jiu-jitsu.
Right.
And I knew nothing because I wasn't even training at the time. And she would just jump on the mat with these girls in the ultimate division.
Right. The open division.
The open division. Go in no gi, compete in every division she could. And we had no coaching, obviously, because I didn't know the sport. She did very little grappling at that point, a few months into training. And my best ability of trying to coach her would hear to see what the other coach was telling their fighter to do. Look for the armbar. And I'd say, Rhonda, watch out for the armbar.
Right. Just do the opposite.
But although she didn't do well at grappling, she always went the distance and just loved it and never gave up.
Well, I mean, like she was passionate about fighting. She really loved fighting, and you know, as they say, you know, beyond winning, losing, it's about, you know, doing what you enjoy doing. So I mean, she definitely was able to do what she enjoyed doing. And now, with that being said, not only have you been a competitor in karate, but you've also competed in, you did judo.
Yes, sir.
You've done some Thai boxing and kickboxing, and some MMA.
Yes, sir.
So we'll definitely talk about that as we go forward. So now you started training and you started getting into knockdown, and I want to say you were maybe, when you started doing bare knuckle, because you did semi knockdown, which is with pads, and you started doing bare knuckle full contact within a year.
Yes,
of
sir.
Training.
My first competition was the first semi knockdown was the very first competition that came up for the school at the time. Competed in that, and I thought I would need a bit more time before I moved on into bare knuckle. And Rhonda and I both had this idea that we were going to talk to Mr. Trammell and say, hey, sir, you know, if it wouldn't embarrass the gym, we'd like to move on to bare knuckle. Right. Thinking that you were going to say, well, give it a little more time. And maybe, you know, after a few more semi-knockdown matches, you'll be ready. But you're always highly motivated and always like people that were willing to take the next step. And you said, that's great. We've got a competition coming up. And we immediately moved into knockdown fighting then. Awesome. And it was a completely different animal.
So how old were you when you first competed, Vinny?
I joined the gym, and first competition was at 35.
So you're one of my inspirations. I just wanted to point that out, that I still have a year before I got to get to Vinny's level.
Well, and with that being said, Pat, like, I mean, same thing with you. I mean, I said, you know, hey, after a year of training, I said, hey, go out. You want to be, if you're going to do knockdown, you know, tomorrow, you may as well start today. Right. And it's never, a lot of people are afraid of it, but it's if you know you're going to do it. Now, if you have no desire to do it, that's one thing. But if you know one day you're going to do it, you may as well jump in the water and start swimming.
Well,
so.
My first day, I came, I said, I want to try a tournament. And you were like, 90 days. I got to fight for you.
Right.
So we don't, like, you don't mess around.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. I believe if we're going to do it, we're going to do it. So you started fighting knockdown, and then, you know, within a couple years, you were winning, you know, all the knockdown tournaments here. Here in the Southeast, we had the World Oyama tournament, and we had the World Yoshikai tournament, and you won both of those in 1 year. And, you know, for Shidokan Atlanta, I want to say, well, now we have three. So the first to actually do that was actually Quincy Sutton. Quincy Sutton, back in like 2008 or 2009, I think, won a Yoshikai and then a World Oyama heavyweight division. Then Vinny did it, and of course, you know, AJ has done it also. So, but like I said, you were the first to like I said, you won those two tournaments, and then you went down, and I remember you and Rhonda also did an event down in Florida.
Yes, sir.
And what was that experience?
It was interesting because we were down in Miami, Florida. The school was, gosh, I can't remember the name of
I know there were some,
organization.
they were with Kyokushin. I mean, there's a lot of Kyokushin organizations, but I know they're with one of the Kyokushin organizations.
And they were a very strong school. A lot of students from overseas, Latin American countries. Kids went there to put in work. Right. And they all fought bare knuckle as soon as they were 16, 17 years old. There was no option to fight semi-knockdown. Okay. So as soon as they got to a certain age, they were fighting without pads. And, you know, often I think, you know, when you're working up your ranks and you're just willing to fight, you're not trying to look for matches that you're going to win and trying to kind of set up, you know, the fights. You're just eager and you're throwing yourself out there. You tend to be the lower person on a totem pole when you go to an organization to fight for their camp. So when we were meeting with the concho of that organization, he said, oh, you know, we've got very good fighters for you guys. They're on your level. You know, they're experienced, but they're not killers. Don't worry. So, you know, me, I'm a real nice guy. I like to know who I'm fighting. If I know who the person is, I'm going to go up and speak with them and have conversation, which I know is a bit out of the ordinary. But I'm fighting for fun and for competition, not out of anger. Personal. Right. So when I'm speaking to my opponent, so I'm 36 at the time probably. I think he was like 25 or so. He's been training since he was 15 and was 6'7".
Wow.
You know, just a young guy full of energy, super tall, and has many years experience. And I said, okay, so this is going to be interesting. But it was a 3-round fight, 3-minute rounds, as opposed to the typical Kyokushin rules.
Right.
I enjoyed that because it gave you time to actually work through things and not worry about just getting clipped and have a wuzari and end up losing. The crowd was very much against the Americans that were there.
Right.
I was told later by a good friend, D. Lee, who speaks a few different languages because of his military background, that they were saying to take the Americans' head off. You know, and chanting that throughout the crowd.
You probably smile back and say, thank you.
Right, exactly. I've got no idea. I think they're just cheering for both of us. But it was a great experience. Ultimately, I lost the fight. I ate way too many low kicks. At the time when I first started, this may seem weird to a lot of fighters, but, you know, getting into this at 35 years old, I've never dealt with pain through contact.
Yes.
You know, as kids, we get into fights and, you know, we get bumps and bruises. But I've never kicked things over and over again with my shins. And my biggest concern in my first, you know, probably 3 or 4 competitions was I'm going to go to kick somebody and I'm going to end up falling down because I'm hurting my own shin.
Right.
So I don't think I threw but maybe 1 or 2 low kicks in that fight. And in turn, my opponent threw repeated low kicks and his legs were 9 feet long. So he was able to catch me even though I thought I was out of range. Lasted the distance. I was proud of myself for that, at least. Disappointed I lost the fight. But it was a great experience overall. I learned a lot. Learned that you do need to check kicks and you need to throw kicks.
Right.
And I think that was a really pivotal point for me and a you know, turning point in terms of my fighting style.
Right.
That I just started to push forward and throw my kicks as hard as I could and not worrying about if I was going to hurt myself or not. And that's when things really started, you know, turning around for me in terms of winning competitions.
Awesome.
So was this the competition where you were a yellow belt and you were fighting a taller guy with a ponytail?
Yes, sir.
And you,
no, I'm sorry.
Okay.
No. That was a semi-knockdown.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this was...
So you were orange belt then, this one.
I think I was an orange belt, yeah.
Okay. I watched some of your early fights because your first advice to me for my first tournament was, even if you have to close your eyes, just keep going forward and punching.
Yeah.
Well, and what I was going to say, in watching you develop, as you developed and became more seasoned and experienced, you know, the low kick became one of your strongest weapons.
Yes, sir.
And I mean, I remember one tournament, Vinny was fighting a pretty well-known bare knuckle fighter locally, and you threw a low kick, and he was trying to jump over the leg.
Right.
You kicked him in the leg. You know, can you imagine somebody trying to jump like you jumping the hurdles? He's trying to jump off the low kick, and but yeah, you know, you were known for having very strong body punches and very strong low kicks. And so when did, I guess, so you, as you get more seasoning, you eventually, when was the first time you did a Shidokan event?
So the first Shidokan event, I believe, was 2013. It was Peter Enger's event in Germany. And we went over as the Shudo Kings event, which was a professional fight show where he also showcased the finals of Shidokan bare knuckle rules events that evening. So flew out to Germany, first time traveling internationally, which was a big deal, you know, at the time as well. I believe Shihan Eddie Yoshimura was there as an official, and one other guy, a guy named Mike from Chicago, was there competing as well.
Yes.
So we were there, and it was a big deal. It was the first time fighting in front of you know, a live audience that was of that size. I believe that he always had the fights broadcast on some level as well. Yes. And we were there with, you know, really big names, you know, that were fighting MMA, kickboxing, and the Shidokan strong rules. It was my first event for Shidokan strong rules.
Okay.
We put in a lot of time studying judo, so I was looking forward to trying to execute my judo and see, you know, what I could do with it, and it worked. The opponent I was set up against was against somebody much more experienced than me.
Right.
Now I'm a pretty big guy. I'm 6 foot. Back then I was about 250 pounds and pretty muscular.
Right.
But when I entered into these matches, I was typically, you know, 3 to 5 inches shorter than most of the guys I competed with in a heavyweight class. And this kid was quite tall, and I think he was a secondary black belt, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
So I
think you were purple belt then.
Yeah, I was just a purple belt. Yes, sir.
Right.
So my goal was just to push forward
Right.
and to try to grab and use my knees, because as a matter of fact, if you remember, I competed in a local judo tournament shortly
Yes.
before that. I broke my ankle and chipped the bone off the heel, which I wasn't aware of until about 3 weeks before the fight.
Wow.
So leading up to that, I knew I had this injury, and we just said, all right, well, don't kick the bag. We're going to practice knees. Then I finally decided to get an x-ray and found out that I had this, somewhat of a serious injury going on. So
Right.
that was my first experience in taping a foot completely to keep it safe and not being able to kick with that leg. And it worked in my favor because I just went in for the clinch and the grabs and threw knees.
Right.
And the fight was ultimately won, due to knees.
Awesome. So with that being said, and then you were able to fight with injury. You've had some other serious injuries. You had back surgery, and after back surgery, you came back and fought. Would you please explain to everybody what happened and what kind of surgery you had to have?
Sure. So the best I could attribute it to was from years of heavy weightlifting when I was younger. Took a toll on the back. I had a herniated disc between L4 and L5. The pain got excruciating due to the nerve pain, shooting up and down the back and the leg. So I knew I wanted to continue fighting, and the only way for me to do so was to get this taken care of because I was doubled over in pain. So I decided to have the back surgery, and within a few months, I came right back and chose the next competition that we had
Wow.
to compete in. And I was lucky the back surgery was a success. I healed up well and got right back into it. But moving forward, as you mentioned, I had a few other injuries that were quite annoying. Had some issues, deviated septums, and broken noses over time that made it difficult to breathe. And I also had an umbilical hernia. And I was training for what was going to be my first MMA fight, and I realized there's no way for me to go into this not being able to breathe thoroughly and dealing with worrying about being punched in the lower gut. So to prepare for this MMA fight, I scheduled 2 surgeries within 5 days of each other and went in, had these surgeries done. Again, I was very happy and fortunate they were a success, and followed through with that competition as well.
Wow. Now Rhonda also had back surgery.
She did.
What was her issue?
So Rhonda and I had a really funny relationship. We were together since we were 14, so we always, broke each other's chops. And she'd make fun of me when I was laying in bed complaining about how bad my back hurt. And even leading up to the day of my surgery, she would be breaking my chops about it. And I said, you better be careful. God's going to get you back. You're going to end up with an issue. And sure enough, the day that I come out of my back surgery, her back started hurting.
Wow.
She went in, saw my neurosurgeon, and he was completely dumbfounded. He said, your back is nothing compared to your husband's. It's much worse. You need a spinal fusion. And at this point, we were moving up the ranks in Shidokan. We were doing rather well, competing at a higher level internationally. And we had an opportunity that year to fight 3 international events and to test for our black belts in Hungary. So being that we weren't young, we already, were dealing with some injuries. We knew that we were perhaps on borrowed time. Rhonda decided to push her back surgery off for a year and to literally, deal with the pain. She worked with pain management doctors and tons of stretching, acupuncture, massages, you name it, she was doing it so that she could have this opportunity to compete as many times as she could internationally that year and compete to test for a black belt. So she did it. She actually went through.
Now, weren't you guys were about to leave, if I remember, you about to leave to go out of the country for a competition where her back went out on her?
Yes, sir. So when her back was first beginning to hurt, because I believe my surgery was in September, and we were getting ready to head out for Japan so that Rhonda can compete in Japan, but her back started hurting her really bad. We had the car loaded. We were ready to head to the airport, and her back was so bad that she said, I could fight. I could take my pain pills, my anti-inflammatories, and get on the mat and fight, but there's no way I could sit on a plane for 13 hours. And that was the deciding factor, getting in there and being punched and kicked.
So I'd rather fight than sit on a plane.
Than sit on a plane, because being in that, sedentary position was too much of a challenge. So unfortunately, we had to reach out to Concho and Uliana and let them know we weren't coming. And it was a really big disappointment because this was, gosh, I believe they had something set up for us. I believe they were going to give us our black belts
Right.
during the ceremonies
Yes.
at this event. And Concho and Liliana actually extended a extremely gracious, extension to us where they said, "Don't worry, we're gonna have a layover in Atlanta, Georgia, in a couple of months, and we're gonna come in and award your black belts to you personally in the United States." So although we couldn't compete and the back was too bad at that point, the organization really stood behind her.
Right.
And still honored her with the giving her the black belt.
What year was that, Vinny?
That was November of 2015,
Right.
I believe.
Right.
Because that's when, because immediately she scheduled her back surgery the following day when we decided we couldn't go to Japan. She got on the phone with the doctor's office and said, "I need the surgery." Had the surgery, a few days later or a few weeks later. And then Concho and Juliana and their crew were in Atlanta. I believe it was
Right.
November.
So yeah, they were in between. They had just visited couple countries, I think, in South America, and they had a layover in Atlanta. And during that layover, they stayed for a day here, and we had them come to the dojo. As Concho Sueno did a seminar for the students, and then he awarded Rhonda and Vinny their black belts. And I even have some of the video footage on our YouTube channel from that actual seminar. So after you have these back surgeries, then you're back on the competition trail. So, like I said, you fought in Germany, and then your next international competition was in France.
I believe so. We fought in Nice, France.
And what was that experience like?
It was interesting because leading up to it, if you remember, Shion Coco reached out, and we had 3 fighters that were going to compete there, and we were all brown belts.
Right.
And I believe she explained to you that it wasn't a good idea for us to come into the event and compete because it was a professional fight show that was going to be televised, and it was a very big event. And being brown belts, we probably weren't on the level to compete, at this location. And you assured her not to worry, that it was going to be okay.
Yeah.
So, leading up to that, I always went into things considering my age, considering my lack of experience at the age I was, and knowing that most of the people I was competing against, especially overseas, started out very young in the sport and have competed their entire life. I always felt like I didn't have anything to lose. That going in, I wanted to win, of course. You always want to, achieve success. But I went in, I wouldn't say carefree, but I went in with the attitude of I'm going to go in and do the best I possibly can, and I'm going to leave it all on the mat. And however it turns out, I'm either I'm going to win or I'm going to learn what I need to do next time.
Right.
But then we started looking up the person I was matched up against, because this again was going to be a professional fight show with matchups, which was uncommon for us because we typically fought
in a tournament. You just fight whoever shows up at the tournament.
Right. So we were fighting this great guy that's been a part of the organization for years, Ameto.
Yes.
And we start seeing video footage of him from the time he was 18 years old, competing in the Shidokan, world tournaments and placing top 5, top 3, doing extremely well. And I was a much larger fighter than he was, but he was my age and had decades of experience against me. So I remember Rhonda, who never really had much concern about us going into fights. We always knew there was a risk of us getting hurt, severely injured. She started watching these videos, and I saw the look of worry in her eye. And I said, well, what's the worst that can happen? You get knocked out, you get injured. We're in the wrong game if we're worried about that.
Right.
So we went in and went to the weigh-ins, and this was one of the first really big, pre-fight interviews that we had to do, pre-fight meetings. It was a pretty large event. Yeah.
I remember when we were driving around in Nice, and you'd see they had billboards, and it was well promoted, really nice event, and a great crowd. Lights and smoke, and everything you see in
Yeah, it was a very good
show.
production.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
they had a
very good
big
production.
catwalk for the fighters to come down,
Right.
and fans were slapping hands, you know, as you're walking down and asking for
VIP
interviews.
tables and
Right.
everything. And so very, very nice, well put on event.
Yeah,
Actually, it featured, you had the karate fights, you had kickboxing fights, and triathlon fights.
And triathlon, yes, sir. So, you know, we entered into the event. Definitely nervous going into it. As I said, even though I felt like I didn't have anything to lose, you're always nervous going
Right.
into an event. And I don't think, if you're not nervous, there's something wrong. You know,
Right.
I think that works for you. I've read a lot of books, and they talk about jitters are actually a good thing for people to have. And
Right.
they talk about racehorses that a lot of people bet right before the racehorse will compete, will run based on how jittery it is, because that horse is going to compete really well because it's pumped up. So we got out there, we competed. Again, this was a three round, 3 minute per round fight.
Right.
And being older, again, being a bigger guy that never did this type of cardio, I was always worried about my cardio for the
Right.
fights and how am I going to last? Because my style of fighting was always to push straight forward and go as hard as I could in hopes that I'd finish it before I got tired. And
Right.
I was never very fast. And I think the one thing that worked for my advantage if a fight went the distance was I moved at the same rate of speed in the first round as I did in the third.
Right.
So
Right.
even though I was slow in round one, I was still consistent in round
had to
three.
catch up that way.
Right, exactly. But so, you know, the fight turned out in my favor. You know, I was able to win the fight through, again, hard body punches, some low kicks, but judo actually played a big part of it as well. I executed a couple of really good takedowns and knees as well. The clinch and the knee
Right.
worked for my favor in that fight.
And speaking of judo, so you said that. So how do you feel judo has? You said judo has definitely helped you in these competitions, especially with the Shidokan rules. You can clinch and you can throw. Have you said this has been a very a big asset to your game?
Yes, sir.
Have you found that a lot of the guys that you fight, maybe they didn't have that ability, or you didn't feel that ability?
Absolutely. Up until the Shidokan World Open in Japan,
Yes.
I don't think I fought a single fighter that had judo that was anywhere close to what we have. The Romanian fighters were really good in judo,
I see.
and they were able to defend it and try to execute it as well.
Right.
Aside from the Romanian fighters, in my experience at least,
Right.
I was never matched against another fighter that had strong judo.
Got you. And now let me ask you this: so adding to your rapping experience, you also fought a big MMA fight in Germany, and I want to say, was that 2015 or 16?
That was 2017.
Oh my gosh, I forget.
Yes, sir.
So you fought. His name was Chris. What was Chris's name?
Chris Mal.
And how big is this guy?
Chris was 6'7" and 353 pounds.
Can you imagine that, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, I saw the video.
You know, like you said, you know, it's like they could come up with another weight class there, right? Because we're heavyweights or super heavyweights or heavyweights, you know, once you cross over a certain amount, it's whatever. So
This fight was billed at over 265, and I came in at 233.
so hoping that maybe he would come in at 266,
Right.
So 6'7", 300 and what?
Literally 353 pounds.
That's a big man. So what was your strategy going into? Because I don't know. What did we know? We didn't really see a lot. I know he had some footage, but you know what were you thinking? What did it feel like to be in there with a man that big? You know, like I said, the wind of his punches could probably knock the average person down.
Yeah, well, and he was
that experience like?
he was an intimidating person to look at as well.
Yeah.
Ultimately, afterwards, and speaking with him, we became friends, and he's a great guy.
Yes.
But looking at him, completely tattooed, I believe he had tattoos on his head, shaved head, and just a big, intimidating person to look at. I've watched probably 4 or 5 of his fights. He was, you know, pretty much a full-time fighter.
Yes.
And focused on MMA. And I really didn't know what to expect going into it. The biggest thing I knew I had to worry about, because my ground game wasn't very good, was to not end up on the ground.
Right. Well, a guy that big, I don't care if your ground game is real good. You didn't want that guy on top of you.
Right.
Right.
So, you know, I was hoping, you know, to walk in and try to, you know, jump in and get some punches in
Right.
and try to tag him, you know, with the jab and set up, you know, a good cross. But he was so long. His frame was so big, and his arm length, I can't even imagine.
Touch you from the other side of the ring.
Right. You know, and I would try to jump in, but I couldn't even get close to him. You know, if you could imagine people that followed MMA back in the day when a guy that was 6'8", that was the heavyweight champ, and he fought the great grappler. I'm at a loss for the names now, but the grappler was 5'10", and the champ was 6'8". So even when he was in his guard, he couldn't reach to punch him in the face. And that's what was happening to me. You know, I would try to come in real close, and I couldn't even really get punches off to the face.
Right.
So I realized my best possibility to try to hurt this guy was going to be through low kicks.
Right. You threw lots of low kicks.
Through lots of low kicks, and he often was grabbing me to try to, you know, keep me in close, I guess, to try to take me down.
Right.
I think judo was a tremendous help for me in that fight. Because
to keep the balance, right?
Yes, sir. We worked a lot on the, you know, keeping my hands underneath him and keeping his weight up and my weight down, so he couldn't take me to the ground. And I had to actually throw a lot of knees to his legs,
right?
Because we were in close, up against the rope so often.
And his thighs are about as high as your stomach.
Literally,
right?
yeah, literally. So, you know, I worked as hard as I could with the low kicks and with the knees to the legs, and fortunately, that broke him down over time, I believe.
Yeah,
and weakened his punches.
Yeah, I if I remember correctly, I remember, like I said, you had really good. I think that's the best footwork I've ever seen you use.
I had no choice.
Right? You used really good footwork. You tried the jab when you could, and like I said, it was the low kicks, and over time, it definitely hurt him to where it made it difficult for him to move, and it made it difficult for him to sit down on, you know, on that bruised up leg.
Yes, sir.
And I think that was definitely key. And then, like I said, on the clinch, you were able to actually put him in the corner. Like, he would try to press you against the ropes, and you were able to turn him and get your underhooks and you know, keep him from taking you down. It was very, very. I mean, you know, he was the hometown guy, and all the German fans were applauding for you. That was. I mean, they applauded for both of you, but that was one of those situations where regardless of where you're from, the fans just enjoy watching a great fight.
Yeah, it really felt that way, you know, and on a small level, you know, kind of felt like the Rocky IV movie. Because I came in again as the hated American,
right?
Because typically nobody wants to see an American win on their home soil,
right? And
I'm fighting somebody from the local area that was a well-known guy and competed regularly, right? And of course they were looking at, you know, I was a pretty muscular guy with a good build, and Chris was just a big, strong man that was a really good fighter, right? And I'm sure they were looking at, you know, hoping the American was going to get knocked out, right, and see this muscular guy, you know, flat on the mat. And I took the abuse. And what's funny is that this was the first fight that I had where I took a ton of punishment to the face from his punches. And, you know, he was throwing these giant hooks.
Whatever. He backhand, whatever.
Right.
Just, you know, it's like, if he laid his hand on you, you'd almost fall over.
Like fighting a grizzly bear.
Right, exactly.
So, you know, got to the point, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but my goal was just to go the distance. I wanted to show up, and I always just wanted to prove that I worked as hard as I could, and that I was in there, you know, and I had, you know, just, you know, a lot of will and you know, determination, and never to give up. So by the middle to the end of the second round, I'm exhausted, you know, getting smacked around and, you know, thrown all over the ring and trying to control someone.
With this bear.
Yeah, it was 120 pounds heavier. Than Peter Angra, who was the head of the organization that held this Shidokan event, had mentioned that this was the biggest weight difference of any fight that they've ever put on the books there. And it was tough. It took a lot of energy. So I was completely exhausted, out of breath. And it got to the point where he was hitting me with these shots. And as we all know, I think I never kept my guard up. I was never good at blocking punches and kicks. And I said, all right, well, you know what? I came out today. I fought really hard. Sooner or later, one of these punches are going to knock me out. And at least I came in here and I fought as hard as I could. And then the end of the third round came, and 15 minutes into this fight, I'm like, I'm still standing. What in the world is going on here?
Wow.
But I kept pushing forward regardless of the abuse. By the end of the fight, I grew up, you know, I was born in 75, so I grew up watching guys like Ray Boom Boom Mancini up in the Northeast. And, you know, these guys would be swelled up at the end of the fight. And the announcer actually clowned me a little bit about not looking in the mirror because of how beat up my face was, you know, after, which I knew. But, you know, I was just proud that I lasted, and I was able to keep actually trying to execute what techniques I was capable of. You know, it wasn't a pretty fight. It wasn't very technical on my side.
I thought it was great. And maybe we'll have to have him come back into a breakdown of that fight.
Oh, definitely.
If anything, it'd be a great for the fans, like how to fight somebody who weighs over, you know, almost 150 pounds more than you.
Right.
a great self-defense. How to fight a giant.
Well, and as you mentioned, you know, it was funny because I never was good at footwork, and therefore I never really used footwork. Most of my fights I just pushed forward.
Right.
And with this gentleman, I had to. I had to circle. I had to learn and improvise.
Right.
Which was a big change for me.
Well, and with that, and that goes to show, I guess, would you say that, you know, in training, like I said, you had a preferred way of fighting, but would you say that the training that you and your fellow students do is well, it's done in a way to make you well-rounded so that you can adapt?
Absolutely. Well, what's great about, you know, our school, you know, your school, sir, is that we've got fighters that range in size, speed, ability, and everybody you work with gives you something different to focus on.
Right.
And I was really lucky at the time because we had Orion, you know, a good friend of ours training with us, you know.
Hey, Orion.
And Orion, I think you had a big part of helping me win that fight because Orion's a big man.
Yeah, he's the largest student. I mean, and he's 275.
Yeah, and extremely athletic.
Yeah,
extremely athletic. So practicing judo with someone on his
and
size
then you
of
had to work out a
strength.
little bit with Kyle also.
Yeah, I did work with Kyle on that as well. He's another really big and strong man, great in judo.
Hey, Kyle. Kyle's probably
260s,
yeah, right.
260s, 270s,
So,
yeah.
you got to work out with a couple big guys. And then now to get ready for that, did we go over to Sensei Leo's also?
We did, yep. You had
Leo
invited
White.
me over to Sensei Leo White, and I had taken a bunch of judo classes there
Okay.
to focus on it.
Yeah, right. Oh, Pat, you about to ask a question? I'm sorry.
First, I was going to point out that it was an MMA fight, but this is the first fight I've ever seen of Shidokan. I want to point out that it was Ukraine, right? And you
This one was Germany.
yeah, and it
Yes,
was
sir.
J, AJ, you, and Zach.
And Zach, yes, sir.
So I created a music video for it. I'll put it in here.
All right.
But I would not have even known it was an MMA fight because your clinch game was so strong. Like, I don't think he ever took you down,
No.
right?
No.
And he was in the corner on the ropes almost the whole fight.
Right, you kept turning him every time he tried to push you against the.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to add, Vinny was terrifying when I first met him because he would only come in and work ground game. So we'd be doing class. Vinny wouldn't even say anything. He'd just grab a board, throw a judo on the floor, and just start beating the crap out of the dummy, and then like wave, say something nice. But I didn't talk to him really till afterwards. And my impression of Vinny was like fear. I mean, he's 250-pound bodybuilder and all that. But my first two fights, I may have talked to Vinny twice.
Really?
He was there each time. He had Gatorades in hand, gave me pep talks. So like, I just wanted to thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Yeah.
And it gave me a great opinion of Shidokan because you were a killer. I mean, you're still a killer.
Thank you.
Yeah. It was-
Yes.
So and then now so that was, and then the year before that, okay, that was 2017, and then
Yes,
when
sir.
you and Rhonda went and fought. So the first time you were going to go to Japan, it was put on hold because of the back injury.
Right.
Then you guys, the following year, I guess this is 2016.
2016. Yes, sir.
You guys went and you both fought in the All Japan Championships. What was that experience like? 'Cause you in that particular tournament, you fought in the bare knuckle, the karate division, and the kickboxing.
Yes, sir. It was absolutely amazing, you know, to step on Japanese soil and to fight karate in
Right.
Japan. It was
The
just such an exhilarating
the
thing, like
land of
leading up to
karate.
it. Exactly. And the Japanese people were absolutely amazing. The way that they treated us from the moment we got there, the overall experience was just beyond compare. Never experienced anything like that in my life. And leading up to the event, they decided to take us to train the day before the fight. Now, typically, I wouldn't train for about 4 or 5 days before a fight.
Right.
I tried, you know, just working mental game, a lot of visualization, a lot of, just dry runs in my head.
Right.
I always let the body rest. And they told us, you're going to come and do a 2-hour workout with us. So I'm thinking here, oh gosh, we're being set up. They're going to come in and try to wear us out, 20 hours before we're going to be on the mat. And then we realized there was a children's class. So now we're feeling a little embarrassed, like, well, what do they think of us? They're putting us in a children's class. Right. So then we saw what karate really means in Japan. Right. And the children's class was on a level that you can never imagine. These kids ranged in age from probably 5 to 12 or 13, and they worked nonstop for that entire time. I was partnered with a young man who was 13 years old, and he was 6 foot tall, probably 170 pounds, and fought his heart out in the sparring, sessions that we did. The other people that were there were all relatively older, probably in their 60s and above, and they fought nonstop in the sparring. In the sparring rounds, and they did everything that the kids did and everything that we did who were active fighters at the time. Wow. It really just showed me how important this was to them and how much the sport meant to them. They invested so much energy and time into it. We had a great time meeting the people there. Everybody was very kind to us. And then the next day it was ready to fight. Right. So this was by far the biggest competition we were ever at in terms of number of competitors. Yes. They just had an open division, so we knew we were just being thrown out there with the best guys in the Shidokan organization. Right. And there were people from, I think, 25 or maybe 26 countries competing at this event. So the heavyweight division I was in was a relatively small class. We only had to fight 3 times to make it into the finals. And for kickboxing, it was the same. I lost my first fight in kickboxing. Yes. And it's kind of funny. I was matched up against a guy, and of course, once again, I started talking with the person I knew I was going to fight because we're looking at the fight cards, and he's joking around that they're putting the 2 oldest guys together to fight, the first time.
Eliminate each other.
Exactly. And as we're talking, and I'm trying to always gauge my opponent's level of experience and ability, it comes out that he was a professional hockey player in the Romanian National Hockey League. Wow. But they had changed the rules some years ago where if you fought, you were going to be banned for a set amount of time with no pay. And they said, if you want to fight, go join karate, boxing, whatever you want to do. And he said, well, I'm an enforcer on this team. That's my goal. I'm not a goal scorer. Right. I'm not, a defender. I'm the guy they send out to beat people up, to intimidate. So he decided he wanted to get into fighting full time. And from that point forward, he was fighting professionally. So now I'm sitting there scratching my head like, this is great. I'm getting in here. I grew up watching the NHL in the 80s where these guys would, compete, no helmets on and just drop their gloves and go at it, missing teeth. And I've got this vision in my head of this guy as to what he's done leading up to his career in kickboxing. And he was good. He was a good fighter. He definitely had a background in it. And I think he took it a little easier on me. I think he kind of worked at the level that he had to, to beat me as opposed to trying to destroy me, which was kind of him. But getting into the event, getting into the rounds for the Shidokan Strong Rules, the competition was pretty tough. Won my first fight, executing a couple of judo throws as well. A lot of powerful low kicks. Second fight went pretty much the same way. I was able to use the low kick. And I think I had a couple of judo throws in that as well. That, I think the judo aspect in Strong Rules breaks the spirit of the other fighter if they're not used to the judo. Right. If they don't know how to defend it, as soon as you grab them, you could see them just kind of stiffen up. Right. And a big move that I enjoyed using was sort of guard. Yes. So I'd come in for a clinch, I'd throw a knee or two, and as they were trying to defend the knee, I would go in for, the sort of guard. And it worked almost every time because they just weren't ready for it. Wow. By the time we got to the finals, I was pretty beat up. I had eaten a really strong up kick that broke my nose and split my palate. Oh my gosh. And that was my very first fight. And then
that happened in the first fight.
That happened in the first fight. I tore my tricep in the first fight. I got kicked in the face with a heel. And then as soon as I walked off the mat, they said, okay, you're now fighting your kickboxing round. And I'm bleeding, and I'm not even, my nose is pouring blood, And I'm like, well, can I get a minute to at least pack my nose with Vaseline?
Like, no,
and, right. And then they said, well, we're going to give you one fight. We'll put one fight in front of you, and then you're going to compete. Now, of course, that fight was a quick knockout. So I'm back on the mat.
Right. Hurry up.
And it really teaches you that you've got to just always be ready. You know, this is real life. So went in there, and I continued. But by the time I got to the fourth fight of the evening, the finals for the Shidokan Strong Rules, I was up against a really strong opponent, a young man from Romania. Right. The entire Romanian team did exceptionally well throughout this event. They came with a very large team, and they all were great fighters. And he was able to neutralize my judo. Out of the we went 3 rounds, and I was only able to execute 1 throw. Okay. You know, he was fast. He was much lighter than me, moved really well. But I think, once again, my tenacity and me just being tough and not accepting defeat broke his spirit over time and let me just keep pushing forward. Again, at my slow rate of speed, which isn't anything exciting to watch, but it just broke him down over time, I believe, where by the end of the 3rd round, it was difficult for him to stand and be strong at attention. So it was a really, really fun experience overall.
Speaking of that, now, Pat, on your first trip to Japan, before you went there a year before you competed, right?
Yeah, I was going to ask Vinny about that.
You visited some dojos.
Yes.
And Pat said that you would remember.
Okay.
Yeah. So I went to Murakami's dojo.
That's one of you.
Yeah, I went to 3.
Okay,
I went to a few.
I know you did Makoto the fighter.
Yep.
Okay, that's Murakami. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I went there, and Makoto Shishimi, the K1 fighter. There's another Makoto that was active in K1.
Gotcha, yes.
Like, when I went there, they were eyeballing me very weird because none of them spoke English, and they thought I was like scouting their guy or something. And this dude's big. He's hitting pads. But he's about your size, Vinny, and you're the strongest guy I've ever seen, so I wasn't too thrown by it. And I could tell they were putting on a little show, and they seemed like taken aback that I wasn't like, oh, my God, he's so powerful or whatever. I mean, he was. He's a K1 fighter. But they got kind of like aggressive with me, like, why are you here? And like translating. And I tried everything. I was like, I'm a Sihan Trammell student, Shidokan Atlanta. And then I stopped, and I went, Vinny, and it went like this, and they go, Vinny, and then they just all start walking. There was like 4 of them. Start walking forward, punching. Immediately run and get me a T-shirt. Tell me I'm always welcome there. Sit down and start trying to talk to me. So the impression you left on them was huge, and it wasn't just them. It was anytime I went anywhere. Like, I went to a kids class at a gym. Yes. It sounds like similar to what you did, and like again. They're ignoring me. They're kind of like teasing me for not knowing the kata and stuff like that. And then I'm like, oh, Vinny. And then they're like, oh, Vinny. Same deal.
Maybe it was the kids.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Knowing Vinny's name had got me so many drinks and so many meals. Between the 2 of you, I didn't really pay for my trip till the 5th or 6th day. So I know they think very highly of you.
And I appreciate that. Everybody there was amazing. And, at the end of the kids class that we took, and I giggle at saying the kids class that we took because it sounds like we were in there with a bunch of children that knew nothing. Meanwhile, they were breeding, and creating, animals to fight, super strong later in life. They gave a little speech about us, and they translated it, and it said, the Americans, talking about us, not everyone in America, but us in general, don't have very strong technique, but we have very strong heart, and that, very strong, determination. Right. And I believe that in Japanese culture, even if you don't have this beautiful, technique and, are a very technical fighter, just having that strong will to compete and not give up against all odds, the samurai spirit, yes, sir, develops a lot of respect. So I really appreciated that from them because I never felt like a true martial artist. I always wished that I had a better technical ability. Right. But early on, I realized we're all born with different tools. Right. And as much as I could train focusing on just technique, it would never be at the level of what my opponents would have that are born with that. Right. So I had to focus on my strengths as well, hence the low kicks, the body punches, and judo. And they recognized that, which made me really appreciative that I wasn't somebody who was frowned upon as just this big clunky American who's in here using his muscle or size or strength to win fights against smaller opponents. They actually did have respect for me for just being a very determined and hardworking fighter. So.
And let me see. So also, and then now I want to back up too, because what year is it? You also competed in the WKA North American Championships for Thai boxing.
Yes, sir.
And that was a big tournament. So you had guys coming from all over, the country and Canada. What was that experience?
So leading up to that, I always wanted to fight in as many styles as possible. I wanted to experience things. I knew I was never going to have a career as a fighter. I just wanted to do it for fun, achieve.
Speaking of career, would you please tell everybody what you do for a living?
So I've got a transport company. I'm a small business owner. I work about 60 or 70 hours a week, and fighting always had to kind of fit into that schedule. Right. Fortunately, my office is about a mile away from Shion Tramel's gym, which makes it convenient. I would be able to just leave 6 o'clock at night, go train, and then come back. Unfortunately, though, during my rise, there weren't many fighters that were training in the 6 o'clock class. Right. Most of the fighters, the active fighters, they're training at noon. So being, employed full time and only being able to break away for an hour or two at 6 p.m., often classes were very small. Right. Often it was me and Mr. Tramel by ourselves. I even joke around that we had, really good young friend of mine, Max. Max, who was a young man at the time in his early to mid-teens when I was coming up and fighting, and it would be me and Max that were, training together.
So Max helped him prepare for those.
And he really did. And just as Marco London explained on your show last week,
the kids.
Yeah, he explained that. Yeah, you learn. And I truly believe that whoever I'd work with, whether it be the highest level fighter that I might be an anchor for them to drag around the ring, or if it was a 12-year-old boy who's, up and coming, trying to learn the sport, that I could still have an incredible workout. And it's because of the way that you have put together the classes and the training routines. You would always sit there not knowing if we were going to have, 15 to 20 people in a class or two. Right. And you would improvise and immediately create a workout that would still kick your butt regardless of who was there and what the level was. So leading up to WKA, I had very little kickboxing experience. Right. I knew I wanted to do kickboxing, but at the time, kickboxing class was only during the day. Monday and Wednesdays, we had our Shidokan classes. Right. Tuesday and Thursday was combat conditioning. So when we spoke and I had mentioned I'd really like to do this WKA tournament, we had then changed over to Tuesday and Thursday being a kickboxing class. Mm-hmm. And most sparring was done during the day and then on Saturdays. On Saturdays. So I didn't have a lot of sparring leading up to it as well. I never worried about any of that stuff. I just knew that this is what I wanted to do, and I was going to be as prepared as I possibly could be the day that I walked out onto the mat. The WKA was a big event. Gosh, weigh-ins and the fighter meetings took about 7 hours of standing outside in the cold. Right. It was never organized very well because of the number of competitors that would show up. Right. High-level guys that were competing there. A lot of people competing at the WKA events. It would be their last event before going pro because they were trying to win a world title as an amateur. Right. So, walking into that was a lot of fun. My mother and father came out. My mother stayed in a hotel room for 3 days because she didn't want to watch. She didn't want to watch the fight. Right. Jarrell was there, as my head coach for the competition, and it was interesting because we grew up in a neighborhood where as kids you get into fights and come home with a bloody nose, and your father asked you, "Did you win?" And that was pretty much the question. And that's what they wanted to know. Also, did you start it? Because if you started the fight, you were going to get a smack in the head, right, to add to it. But so I never thought that my dad had any concerns about me fighting. I always thought that he was confident in me getting out there. But as a father, of course, you always worry about your son or your children. So Jarrell had told him that he was going to do the ring walk with me and be in my corner. And he was like, no, I'm gonna be up in the stands with my camera. And Jarrell's like, no, this is your son. You're gonna be here with him. Right. And he's like, no, I'm good up here, And I didn't realize the reason why until it kind of sank in. We were there the entire first day of fights. I didn't have a fight. Right. My first fight was at 11 o'clock. The second day, 11 p.m. So we watched dozens of fights with head kick knockouts, knees to the face, you know, just really brutal knockouts.
Right.
And this was the first time my father was ever at a live fight show. And knowing that I didn't have much experience, of course,
You're gonna do that?
Right, exactly. So, you know, walking out there, it was a lot of fun. You know, I was watching the guys train and, you know, watching the guys compete and warm up. It was definitely a bit nerve-wracking because, again, I knew these guys were way above my level, my experience. Talking with a few of the competitors, you know, they would do 100 rounds in a row of sparring. They would just spar as many rounds as they possibly can for a weekend. And that would be part of their training. And, you know, I was like, gosh, you know, I'd get 3 rounds of sparring. And if I was lucky, right, exactly. So, you know, went in there. My first fight was a bye. Second fight was, again, 11 p.m., literally, Saturday evening, you know, the second day. And then I won that fight and went to distance, and I was able to get the upper hand. Sunday was the finals, and I was fighting against, again, another, you know, monster of a man, really big kid, much younger than me, of course. He had to be 6'6" and somewhere around 320, 330 pounds.
Wow.
And he was faster than me also. So even though he was big, he had fast hands, yeah. And, of course, in Muay Thai, you know, big focus is the clinch.
Yes.
And I was new to the clinch, so that wasn't working for me in that fight. We went the distance, but I did end up losing ultimately. I came close, though, because he didn't want to answer the bell in the third round. And I was nervous because this was the first time I was walking into an event, you know, getting punched in the face repeatedly. Right. So I was very hesitant, you know, jumping in and throwing the combinations, minimum 3-punch combinations. So I was very hesitant, you know, to do that. And although I believe I could have won the fight if I was a little more experienced and understanding, me being too hesitant, you know, gave up the fight. But again, it was a great experience. Everybody was really kind there, and it was a, you know, well put together show.
Well, and like you said, looking at, like you said, win, lose, or draw, you're able to gain something out of any experience. You know, like you say, that even if you want to test yourself and you were able to do that. Now, let me ask you this: so you've over the past year, you've been going through a series of eye surgeries. What has been going on with your eye?
Yes, sir. So May of 2019, I detached a retina. So I planned on being an active fighter as long as I could. I was 43 at the time and just came off 2 fights that were up in New York that I had competed in and was training with some local guys here. AJ and Melvin had some big fights that were coming up, and I was their primary training partners because they were training at 6 p.m. So we were getting a lot of rounds in, and wear headgear. This is something that I think is really important.
But nowadays, the guys, they don't want to wear the headgear.
Yeah. Well, and for me, being that I didn't get a lot of rounds in sparring, and we're wearing 16-ounce gloves, and most of the fighters that I was sparring with were much smaller than I was, and I was going to go out there and possibly be matched against guys that were anywhere between 60 and 100 pounds heavier than my sparring partners, wearing 10-ounce gloves. I wanted to make sure that I was familiar with feeling the blows. You know, Brock Lesnar, when he got involved in the UFC, had explained that he just was not used to being punched in the face. And the only way to get used to it is by getting repeatedly punched in the face. So, you know, I'd go in there and I would train without headgear. And I'm working with, you know, much younger, talented fighters that are much faster. And I would eat a lot of shots. And I started seeing floaters and went to the doctor, and it turned out I had a detached retina. Like an idiot, though, I called the doctor's office, said, I'm seeing floaters. They called me back and said, you need to come in right away. I waited a week, did about 3 more days of sparring, and then finally returned a phone call.
A few more hits in the eye.
Right. And I felt like I wasn't quite there yet. You know, if I'm going to have surgery, I might as well make it worthwhile. But so I had the detached retina surgery, and it's been a series of procedures because they don't just go in and repair the eye. They then inject an oil in the eye to hold it in place while it heals. Then they have to remove the oil. Then I was supposed to have the final procedure, which is a lens installed in the eye so that the vision's back to a comfortable level. But that happened when COVID hit. So I was sidelined. That was going to take place in the beginning of April, and that was pushed off for months. So just recently I had the final procedure, and dealing with some minor complications right now, but the eye is, everything's in great shape. and it's healing up well. I just have another few weeks of healing for it. Now, unfortunately, this is going to sideline me from competing in striking arts.
Right.
But I do plan on, you know, working towards getting back into judo.
Okay.
And trying to jump on the judo circuit once I'm 100%.
Well, me and you, maybe we can get a kata team. Me and Vinny.
Us.
We probably won't play.
But we could have fun with it.
But now, would you please tell everybody now, when you get that surgery, a lot of people don't know this. I didn't until you told me. You have to be in the darkness after the surgery.
Right.
For how long? How's that?
So with my procedure, coming out of the surgery, I had to spend 3 weeks of laying down on my right side for 20 hours a day.
Wow.
And the room had to be dark. They didn't want you reading anything, even with your good eye, because apparently, you know, we use both eyes the same. You can't look at something with your right eye without your left eye looking in the same direction. And even if your right eye's, you know, pupil's getting bigger and smaller, so is your left eye, which is going to put strain on an eye that's recovering. So I spent 3 weeks of laying on a couch on my right side, listening to audiobooks, you know, and just trying to pass the time.
Wow.
It was a trying experience. It was definitely like a come to Jesus type meeting with myself. Like, you know, what am I doing? You know, what are my goals? It never discouraged me from fighting. People have even asked me, though, if you knew this was going to happen, would you do anything differently? And without blinking an eye, the answer is no. You know, I would do this all over again, because the experience that I've had and the 7 years or so leading up to that of competing internationally and meeting people all over the world were so great. The relationships that were built. I use the word friend very carefully. I don't believe people that you cross paths with and you chat with here and there are your friends. They're associates.
Right.
But I actually feel comfortable using the word friends with so many people that I've met in our dojo and that I've met overseas that I've only communicated with on social media and see 2 or 3 times a year.
Right.
Because the level of warmness that you're greeted with and the open arms and the attitude of, hey, anytime you want to come here, the door's open. Come visit us. Please spend time.
Right.
Is sincere, you know, and they're 100% honest about it. So I would never give up my experience that I've had through the Shidokan organization just because of this eye injury.
And to add to that, what I think is that when you go and you compete, especially, you know, the Shidokan events, just for the simple fact that you get out there and you fight, you have these Shihans and these other fighters, these other teams that see you fight, you become close faster than you would in normal every day, you know, working with somebody or going to school with somebody.
Right.
Something that brings you together. And I think that common thing, the martial arts, the fighting, and them, they get to see who you are. I mean, you know, a fight will show us who we really are.
Yes, sir.
And, you know, we can see a lot about a person by watching them fight. And I think that's why, you know, once they recognize that, hey, you're a good person. I can tell by the way you know, win, lose, or draw, the way you handle yourself in that fight is what, you know, brings us together. And I think that's why, you know, that seeing, you know, some of our friends in Shidokan organization, you know, 2 times a year, 1 time a year, that's what connects everybody.
Absolutely. And, you know, especially being, you know, it was funny because when I first got involved as a spectator for Ronda's events, I was a big guy. I grew up in a pretty rough town. And in New York, if you're stopped at a traffic light and someone's walking past your car and you happen to glance up at them and they're having a bad day and they look at you, they may start banging on your hood and they may start yelling at you because they're just in a pissed off mood and they may be looking for a fight. So now entering into a karate competition that Ronda would be in, and I'm a big guy, somebody that would otherwise be looked at as a target by smaller men that know how to fight and want to prove their mettle against somebody that's much bigger and stronger looking.
Right.
I'm like, oh man, what am I walking into here? You know, people are going to be trying, kind of like a jailhouse mentality.
Right.
And the first event that I ever went to with Ronda, I was just greeted with so much kindness. And everybody was just so friendly. The attitude was amazing. There was not a chip on anybody's shoulder. And I think it's because of the confidence that comes with being a martial artist. I think there are some combat sports where people, you know, are kind of tough guys and they want to prove themselves, but that's not the case in karate, judo, and things along those lines. So if you go out there, and even if you're an extremely tenacious fighter and you're extremely mean, you know, on the mat, like you were joking last week with Marco London about how he's such a clean-cut, good-looking guy and friendly, but yet, you know, you had mentioned also, Pat, that in the ring, he was a monster.
No joke.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so when people can see that you can separate the two, and that although you may fight ferociously inside the ring, but you're an extremely nice guy outside the ring in public, I think that speaks volumes about your character as well. And that's why I always tried to be as good as I could and to, you know, become friends with the people I competed against. The tougher the fight that I had, I think the closer bond that was created with a lot of the competitors.
Well, and I've seen it. I mean, you know, guys that you fought in karate, you know, in mixed martial arts and in kickboxing, you've maintained, you know, good relationships with all those fighters. And that, I mean, that like you said, that goes to show how it actually it keeps us humble.
Really does.
We go through a struggle. A fight is a struggle, and you go through a struggle with somebody, and it brings you closer.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you. So now, okay, so you're retired from getting, you know, punched and kicked, you know. So will we be seeing you? Will the world see you maybe coaching the next Shidokan team that goes overseas? Will you be going with them maybe to help motivate them and train?
Absolutely.
And inspire them?
Yeah, that's my goal.
Promises were made, Sensei.
I need your help.
I need my coach. Yeah, promises were made.
No, and that's my goal. You know, the past year and a half with the eye has been a challenge because, you know, it's been a difficult thing to deal with, you know, if the eye gets inflamed and sore. So I'm really happy that the final procedure is done and I'm on the path of complete recovery with it. You know, I'm extremely excited to get back into the gym, to train. We've got a brand new stable of fighters in the gym. You know, there's a few of us that have been there for a few years. And then we've got so many young guys that are working extremely hard. So the few times that I'm able to get to the gym now, you know, coming in and seeing these young men work hard and focus the way they are, it's extremely motivating to me. And I really, you know, look forward to being able to contribute in any way I can.
Well, I thank you for, you know, your service to the dojo, what you've done as a fighter, your experiences, because your experiences are going to help make these new fighters better fighters, you know. And you know, we have you know, we still have some of our veterans like yourself, you know, Eric Heeger, Jarrell Bowman, and then like I said, we have, you know, these up and coming fighters, you know, we get John Vaughn, AJ Weathersby, and you got Pat, you got the young, our college kids, our college knuckleheads out there. So I mean, there's a lot of guys that are going to be able to benefit from your experiences, and you know, and I already let them know. And this year is kind of a wash because of the pandemic and whatnot. Sure. But you know, like the Vo brothers and Liam, I told them, I was like, okay, a year from now when we're able to go to another Shidokan event, you guys are up. So I think, you know, we'll be able to get us some young guys out there. And so to add on to his experience as a fighter, how many times have you gone to a country and they said Team USA and it's you and Rhonda, or like you said, it was you, Rhonda, and Mike, and then, you know, these other teams, you know, from the Ukraine, they got 19 people, from, you know, all these Team USA, 2 people, 1 person. So, you know, well, we did have when Pat went to fight
4 or 5. 4, yeah, 4.
I think that's the most we've ever had.
Yeah,
it's the largest team.
But we're moving in that direction, which is good.
So we gotta, you know, get to where we can take, you know, 10, 15 competitors to go and support these international events.
It'll be great, and it's really nice to see the, you know, the fact that we've got people in the gym now that are focused on and determined to compete at that level, and that they want to work up there. You know, that they're excited to actually get out there. I had no idea that Wayne, is it David doing the MMA fight.
Yep.
You know, I was so happy to hear that he was
David Vo.
Yeah, David
Us.
Us, you know, is competing, you know, in MMA right now. You know, these kids are incredible. They're working extremely hard.
Right.
They're great technicians. They push themselves to the point that they're flat out on a mat.
Right.
And seeing the fact that they also have that heart and the will to actually test themselves,
Right.
you know, makes me smile, because often you've got guys that'll come into a gym and they'll work hard, but they're afraid to actually compete.
Right.
And again, it's always great to have people in your dojo that want to train and create numbers for you to keep the gym going. But I just feel like competition, you know, is everything. You know,
Right.
it really shows where you're at with it. You know, if we're doing this to see if we could defend ourselves or defend our family, you've got no idea just by sparring in the gym. You
Right.
need to get out there and stand up. As we were talking on the way over here, Shihan, you know, you fight for the first time and you haul off and punch somebody as hard as you can,
Why
and
is
they're
he
still
still
standing
up?
there, right? And you're like, man, this is not like the TV I just saw. You know, last night I watched a movie and this guy
Right.
punched this guy once and he was knocked out cold.
Right.
So it gives you a better understanding of life in general,
Right.
and the tenacity that you need to, you know, succeed.
Yes. Well, man, I want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us, Vinny. I mean, you know, to take this on short notice. I think I called you yesterday.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And I asked Vinny to do this interview today, and we're so happy and blessed to have him here. And like I said, you know, this guy's one of the hardest working guys, one of the toughest individuals I know. I mean, he's overcome so much, you know, just ever since I've known him. I mean, you know, from loss to pain, you've dealt with it all, and I'm extremely proud of everything that you've done in martial arts, and thank you for what you've done for us and what you continue to do for us.
I appreciate that, Rich, and it comes from the way that you coach us as well. You know, I've learned a lot by watching you in life in general, in a gym, through business. You know, I look at people that I respect. I see how they act and react in situations, and I try to model myself after them in certain aspects of life. And what you've provided to us has been priceless. And it's something that I've shared with everybody I've come in contact with at the gym, that, you know, you're not just joining a gym when you come to Shidokan Atlanta. You're joining a family, and that you're giving us decades of knowledge and experience that you can't get just anywhere. You can't turn on YouTube. You can't read a book. And you can't also get that from many other coaches out there, because people, I believe, kind of retain a lot of their own knowledge for selfish reasons.
Right.
And I've always felt that you've been open with everything you've given to us. So in turn, I thank you, because I've learned so much in the past 10 years with you.
Well, as I always say, I said the same thing. The only difference between a white belt and a black belt, they do the exact same thing. It's just that one has just been doing it longer. That's it.
Longer, yes, sir.
No secrets.
Do you mind if I hit Vinny with some rapid fire questions?
Sure.
Favorite technique, Vinny?
Low kick, obviously, because it's a powerful thing for me.
Favorite judo throw?
The Osotogara has got to be it, being I've executed that a lot in fights. Yeah.
Favorite action star?
Favorite action star. I grew up with, you know, Van Damme and Schwarzenegger and Stallone, so it would be between those three guys back in the day.
Favorite fighter, active or inactive?
In terms of Kyokushin, Hajime Kazumi,
Oh, yeah.
incredible low kick fighter. He said that when he stopped trying to throw the high kicks, he started winning repeatedly, and I kind of modeled myself after that. I was never a great high kick thrower, but realizing that you didn't have to throw high kicks
Right.
to win knockdown karate made me feel a lot more comfortable. And then Goken Saki for kickboxing.
I've never seen Goken Saki. I've seen the other one. You've sent me videos of him.
He's a small heavyweight.
Okay.
You know, maybe 210, 215 at 5'10", fighting.
Looks like
Yeah,
Mike
months.
Tyson throwing kicks.
Yeah, in there. Yeah.
So you've done things like, I think you did IVs and some cryotherapy. Of those like recovery methods, what are your favorite?
So leading up to competitions, I've done as much recovery as I possibly can. Being older, pushing my body to the breaking point. You know, I may not be the hardest training person in class, but I honestly believe that I push my body as far as it'll go. I've dealt with a lot of injuries because of that. In turn, typically would get 2 massages a week. I'd float at least once a week. I'd get at least 1 or 2 IV fluid sessions a week. And then cryo. Cryo would be at least once a week as well. And I think they all play a huge role. They've definitely helped me and benefited me and allowed me to stay in the game longer, at a much older age than the typical fighter. I got involved learning how to throw my first punch and kick when most people have already had a career and retired.
Right.
And then I got, a good solid 8 years out of it before, a serious injury with the eye. So I think the only reason why I lasted that long was because of the steps I took to recover each week.
Favorite line of advice you've ever gotten while you were training?
Just never give up. Just all quoting aside, just to, work as hard as you can and just keep pushing forward.
Is there anything you'd like to tell new people coming up, like a message or a specific thing about your legacy?
I just think, the most important thing is just to, truly commit yourself. If you're going to do this and if you want to compete, you've got to be all in. It's not a part-time gig, even though for me, my business always came first. But when it was time to train, that was the only thing that was on my mind. My phone was off. I was there on the mat. I was always on time at the gym. I stayed afterwards. Mr. Trammell would always show us additional techniques if he had time. Never ran out of the gym early. When I slotted the time for the gym, that was the only thing I was focused on. I was never sitting there and trying to squeeze the gym in between things that were more important than the gym. I made a lot of sacrifices, though. I sacrificed time with family, with friends, because my goals were as such. I wanted to be as good as I possibly could at this. So I think everyone's got to make their own decision. Is this something you want to do just as a pastime, or is this something that you want to see exactly how far you can take it? Again, for me, I knew I was never going to be a high-level professional fighter, but I wanted to get to the highest level that I was able to. And I think that that's what the sport calls for. It's not a part-time gig. You've got to be all in.
One last question. Favorite purple belt?
Favorite purple belt?
Yeah.
It'd have to be this guy sitting right next to me over here. But that's a given. We knew that already.
I know, Mr. Trammell, already thank you, but thank you so much. There have been so many times I wanted to quit. I'm older when I started. I was 31 when I started, and I immediately tried to lean on that excuse. And Mr. Trammell wouldn't let me have that excuse, but then Vinny just walked up to me. I was watching Jarrell's fight, and he just whispered, I started when I was 35. And I realized I had to stop complaining about being 31 and being a white belt.
You gotta get a new excuse.
Yeah, so, I appreciate you infinitely, Vinny. Thanks for all your inspiration over the years.
Yeah, and you've done a lot for me, Pat, over the years as well. Training with you has been, tremendous. You're a big, strong, powerful guy, and you're one of the guys in the gym that when you train, you don't give up. You're not holding back. You're sitting here and you're pushing yourself to the point of failure. And I've got so much respect for you for doing that. I think I've mentioned this to you before, and this isn't a slight in any way, but when you first came to the gym, you didn't fit the mold of a fighter. And I honestly didn't think that you were going to be there for a long period of time. And I'm so glad that you are and that you have been, because you've grown into this, extremely, well-rounded competitor, trainer, and you help so many other people in the gym as well. You've been one of the biggest assets to the gym. I think Mr. Trammell will agree with that, and have done so much for all of us.
Thanks. I do want to point out, I don't mind that people think I wasn't going to stay, because I thought that was the fun part, was the idea that people didn't expect me to complete it, right?
Right.
And we have new people come in and they'll talk about how the gym has all these tough guys, and they'll be like, but Patrick's still here. So I can tough it out too. So I don't mind holding that slot of the unsuspecting underdog.
Well, and
I appreciate
it comes from within, though, and that's the whole thing. I think our surface appearance, I'm a pretty rugged-looking guy, and people may look at me and think, oh, that guy is, mean or angry or, must have a chip on his shoulder. Then people get to know me, and are like, wow, you're one of the most, laid-back, calm, mild-mannered people I've ever met.
Right.
So you came in, with a big smile on your face and always in a good mood and always just having time with it, good time with it, that your tenacity and your will to succeed wasn't seen on the surface, per se, until, you just kept doing it over and over again. Yeah. And
I started getting kicked in the head.
yeah, but you didn't stop, and that's the whole thing. And Mr. Trammell, you know this. We've had people that have come into the gym and used to put a lot of these guys with Rhonda. She'd be the only girl that was in class.
Right.
We'd have a new guy come into the gym in his mid-20s, early 30s. I'm a marathon runner. I do this, I do that. I'm in tremendous shape. And Rhonda would tell them, just pace yourself. This isn't a marathon. Pace yourself. This isn't, racquetball.
Right.
We've had men that have walked out in the middle of class training with a girl. We've had men that have walked out at the end of class and never came back.
Right.
And then we had a few that have tried, and did 2 or 3 classes and then didn't come back when they were teamed up with a female. So it's not easy, and it's not for everyone. And I don't say that in any kind of disrespect to the people that gave up with it, because it's our school, although we're small compared to some of these giant organizations, giant schools, we're filled with so many people that are on a level of having professional athlete genes, I truly believe. Even if they don't fight or compete, they come from a background, through their family, through their background in scholastic sports, high school, college, where they're just incredible athletes. I would sit there and I would always slight myself saying, gosh, well, this guy's not even fighting, and he's got so much better cardio than me and so much better technique. What am I doing out there? I don't belong out in the field. And then I'd realize, learning more about that person, he was Division I, track, star throughout high school and college.
Like Dr. Chris, right?
Yeah.
He's so fast.
Right.
Like, he's a sprinter.
Exactly. So, we've got some really, gifted and talented people that are in the gym. And the fact that many of us that don't necessarily have these gifted genetics as an athlete have stayed and have endured and persevered, I think that deserves a huge pat on the back. So, and I think you and I kind of fall into that category.
Oops, I'm honored to be in that category.
Like this, you work out with like J1 and
Yeah, another one.
So,
Yeah, J1.
I don't know if J1 watches this,
J1
but yeah.
Be out fighting on Glory or something.
But
right?
I trained with some other people recently, and they were so much slower than me and smaller than me that I was like, oh, I'm not bad. J1 is just exceptional.
It's just so good. Yeah, exactly.
but people, he's very talented. And people just know
And
him
humble. That's why I didn't
and
know.
very
That's why I didn't know.
J1, we're talking about Josh Rayford out there.
Yeah.
They just don't know that. He's a very good martial artist.
Incredible person and martial artist. Yeah.
Exactly.
And I really appreciate you guys. Yeah, being on here today. When you first mentioned that you'd like to have me on the show, I said, well, where exactly do I fit in? We've got all these amazing people that you're, calling out to do the show. And I felt like I really didn't belong here. But, the fact that you have me here really means a lot.
Oh, like I said, you've done a lot. And, like I said, the work that you and Rhonda have done, it kind of, like I said, you're the first two to go outside of this country and, start a trend for Shidokan Atlanta. So, it's, I'm very proud of the work that you guys have done and appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oos.
All right. Well, everybody, we like to say us to you.
Us.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.